We're up to chapter 10, verse 34. It says, Va'anan Hashem olayem yomam, and the cloud of Hashem was over them by the day, b'nasam min hamachaneh, when they traveled from the camp. So Rashi says, Shiva ananim ksuvim b'maaseim, 7 clouds are written in their journey. Meaning to say, the clouds are mentioned 7 times in the accounts of Bnei Israel's travels. So there's the one in this verse, and in chapter 14, verse 14, it's mentioned, and it says in chapter 9, and in chapter 40 of Exodus, mentioned 3 times. That's what the Sifrei is referring to. Okay. Arba mi arba ruchot, there were 4 on the 4 sides of the camp. V'echad u'ma'al, v'echad u'mata, 1 above, 1 below. V'echad ufneihem, and there was 1 ahead of them, which when magbia tag manmicha tagavoa, lower that which was high, umagbia tanamuch, and raise that which was low, in order to make a level road. V'horeg nechashim v'akravim, and it would kill the snakes and the scorpions. Okay. Min hamachaneh, from the camp, mimakom chaniyatan. The clouds of Hashem was over them by day when they encamped. She says, thank you. She came to consult on Aron Kodesh. Okay. Next pasuk. So you see the 2 nuns. There's the backwards nun in front and behind. Vahi ben Aaron vayomer Moshe Kuma ad Hashem yafutzu avecha veyanusu misanecha mipanecha. When the ark would travel, Moshe said, "Arise, Hashem, scatter your enemies, and let your enemies run away from before you." Says the Rashi, Vahi ben Aaron, when the ark was journey, asalo simaniot milafanav u'milachrav. The Torah made signs before this verse and after it. See the backwards nun at the beginning, right in your Torah before it. Rashi doesn't tell us here what the siman is, the sign is, but in this place where this appears in the Talmud in Tractate Shabbos 115b, there the Rashi says, there Rashi also refers to it, but the actual place where Rashi refers to it as a backwards nun is the Tractate Rosh Hashanah. So there Rashi says that there was a nun before and a backwards nun. And why? In order to tell us that this was not its place. So actually Rashi says that why are there backwards nuns before this passage and after it? Rashi quotes the Talmud in Shabbos because this is not the real place for it. The real place for this passage was much earlier. But why is when it talks about the camps, the formations of the camps and the camps traveling? So why is it listed here? Only because we don't want there to be 3 passages in a row which are sad. That's what Rashi says. And what were the 3 passages? The next passage is the people were complaining, and then after that there was and prior to this there was the departure from Sinai, and they left Sinai like a school child leaves school with joy. So Rashi didn't like that. So Hashem didn't like that they left with too much joy. So therefore, to show that this passage was placed here to interrupt the negative narrative, for this reason, there's a nun before it and a nun after it. Rashi is only adopting the second answer that's offered in the Talmud, but the first answer is that this was a book in and of itself, that you think that there are 5 books of Moses, but really there are 7. That's what the Talmud tells us there. But Rashi doesn't give that answer here. You had a question, Ben?
Just before this little passage, there is the cloud of the Lord being upon them when they traveled.
Yeah.
It's like this protective. It's actually the Rashi talks about the 4 sides, and it's like this incredibly protective force.
Yeah.
So why is that a bad narrative that has to be interrupted?
So
sounds like a
the
very nice-
answer is because it says that they were leaving from Sinai, by Yisume Har Hashem, and they traveled from Sinai. So they were going away from Sinai. So the Talmud says that they're traveling away from Sinai. And they read that as an allegorical message that they were departing from Sinai. And one reason is they just didn't want mitzvahs. Another reason is they left Sinai with too much joy. So those are the answers typically given.
So are the backwards nuns just the siman that Rashi says that was the siman that was chosen? Is there any reason a backwards nun is specifically used, or is that just the sign that they chose?
So it's first of all significant that Rashi here does not say it was a backwards nun. Rashi says there was a siman,
Oh,
and the
right.
Talmud says it was a siman. Rashi doesn't say it was a backwards nun, and here in Rosh Hashanah he calls it a backwards nun. So there's a lot of discussion about the placement of these nuns, and there's other arguments that it wasn't a nun. Some say it was a dot, and some say it was the nun of bin Soa. So, but your question is, what is it specifically about the nun? So one of the answers, I think it was the Maharsha, says that the answer is because nun represents there's two main answers to this. One is that the nun represents the sadness, like inability to have divine prophecy. For example, David HaMelech doesn't put a nun in Ashrei. Because all he could see was falling on one's face. The other aspect is that the nun nafal. Yeah, that's all I could think of. The other idea that's suggested is that this is a very small book of the Torah. There's 7 books of the Torah. This is only 85 letters in it, and so yet nevertheless it contains within the 50 gates of understanding, which are in all the books of the Torah. So that's to indicate the 50 gates of understanding.
The nun is 50 and 50 gates.
Yeah.
So it's to counter the sad. If nun is nafal, which is related to sadness, then is it the theory that if Hashem was upset with the Jews, this is our way of indicating that they had too much joy, so we're putting sadness there to indicate that? If you follow that opinion,
Yeah, it's
is that not connected?
No, it's like that. It's to demonstrate that there was a problem here, that there was a problem with
And then
these
the other
verses.
thing is, there's no problem. It's just an extra book.
It's to show the power of this extra book, even though this is just a small book. This book contains all the holiness of the other books. Because how could there be a book without mitzvos? There's no mitzvos in this book. The commentaries ask, where's the mitzvos? Kuyakar asked that question. There's no mitzvah commanded. So some say, no, there is a mitzvah. Shuva Hashem revivos alpha Israel, reside Hashem amongst the myriads of Israel. That means it's the mitzvah to be fruitful and multiply and reproduce and create myriads of Israel. So this is where Moshe, okay, so the next verse.
This is not written in the Torah, the reverse nuns.
They are written in the Torah. There's a tradition to write these nuns in the Torah. It's not the only time, by the way, there's a backwards nun in the Torah. Anybody know where else there's a backwards nun? There's a backwards nun at the end of Parshas Noach. Nun hafucha. There's a backwards nun at the end of Parshas Noach, the nun hafucha. So there's a lot of times it's a big letter. There is a big letter and a small letters throughout the Torah. There's a tradition that that every letter in the Torah, every letter in the alphabet is represented by either a big letter or a small letter throughout the Tanakh. But the backwards letters is in Noach and here, right over here. But there is a tradition that we have to write this letter in the Torah. And the commentaries ask, how can you write a letter? How can you write a letter in the Torah that's not there? So how can you add in a letter? That's what some wanted to say, that you're not able to write this letter, but the tradition is to write it.
And that these are counted in the character count for the total number of letters in the Torah.
Yeah, these are counted as part of the 304,805 letters, which make up the Torah scroll. So then it states, Kuma Hashem, arise God, Lefisha Yamaktim Lifneim, Ba'al Shloshas Yamim, because the ark will go ahead of them by a distance of 3 days. Moshe Omer, Moshe would say, Amod v'amtein lanu. Moshe would say, the word kuma, Rashi here translates means stop, wait for us. Al tisrachek yoter, stop, you're too far ahead of us. The Midrash Tanchuma v'Yaakov. We have futo vecho, your enemies be scattered. Hamakunas, and those enemies who gather to fight you, let them be scattered. Ve'yanusu misanecha, let those who hate you run away. Ela rotzim, those who are pursuing you. Misanecha, those who hate you. Elu sonei Yisrael, these are the ones who hate Israel. Shekoa sonei es Yisrael, sonei mishamar v'ayom. Whoever hates Israel hates God. As it says to misanecha nasu rosh umiyim alam chayarimu sod. This, by the way, is a truism. If somebody's an anti-Semite, they're anti-God. They really what they don't like the Jews, they're really expressing their displeasure with the way God made the world. And when the ark rested, he said, Shuva Hashem, reside God, Rivavos Alpha Israel, reside God amongst the myriads and the thousands of Israel. Myriads, Rivava is 10,000, so Rivavos is 20,000. Alpha Israel is 2,000. So anyway, so Rashi quotes here, reside Hashem, Menachem Tirgamil Lashon Margoa. Menachem translated it as tranquility. Chaim Beshuva Benachas Tiva Sheyud. Beshuva, in tranquility and calm, you shall be served. Revavos Alpha Israel, Magid Sheina Shchina Shora B'Yisrael, Bechutim Mishnei Alafim Mishtei Revos. That means the divine presence does not rest amongst Israel if there's less than 22,000 people. Okay, so now.
So why do we say the blessing only on
Soloveitchik says
600,000?
another reason. Rabbi Soloveitchik says it's very clear. I mean, you don't need Rabbi Soloveitchik to tell us this. It's very clear that this represents a break in the book of Bamidbar. That the first part of Bamidbar was commandments primarily telling us about the travel, the census, several commandments, the Nazir, the Sota, the confession over the confessions. But now we're going to go to a series of narratives which talk about the absolute fall of the Jewish people and why this generation did not reach their goal of entering into the land of Canaan. So it creates two separate books. They're really two completely different themes, of the book of Bamidbar, and that's separation here in this portion within the Parshas Barosla. It's really two separate books. Yeah, Rabbi Yosef, yeah.
Why do we make the blessing only on 600,000 if Rashi says that Shekhinah is on 22,000?
Doesn't the Mishnah say we make it? There are blessings we make which are on less than 600,000. I have to check the Mishnah again. There are blessings that are made on less than that. I think I'm 50,000. I don't know the answer to your question, but I think it's less than 600,000. But we could look up that Mishnah. Okay, so chapter 11, verse 1. And the people were like those who were misonanim. What's a mitonanim? Rashi says, Eina am ela rishaim. The am refers to the people, refers to the wicked ones. The reference of am refers to the wicked ones. Omer ha'amazah kashem kasherim, and when they're good people, God does not call them ha'am, he calls them kruim ami, they're called my people. And it says shalach ami me'asisi. So when we're bad, we're called the people. When we're good, God calls us my people. And the people were like misonanim. Rashi says, misonanim el lashon alilah. The word mitonanim means a alilah, a pretext. Do you ever hear the expression alilat dam? You know what an alilat dam is in modern Hebrew? You know what the alilat dam is? Do you know that, Judah? Your ears dover ivri. Judah, you know what alilat dam is?
Alilat dam?
Yeah.
Is that when you do a bris, you get that's tipat dam?
That's hatafat dam. Alilat dam is the blood libel, the accusation that the Jews were specifically
accused,
killing the false accusation, the canard, that the Jews were killing children and using their blood in matzah. That's called alilat dam. So ein mitonanim el lashon alilah, mivakshim alilah. That means that they were seeking a pretext. Ha'ech lefrosh me'acharei makom. They wanted to know, how can we separate from God? As it states by Shimshon, Omer b'Shimshon ki toana u'mivakesh. She was seeking a pretext. So people were seeking a pretext of Rabba Aznei Hashem. They were seeking a pretext that would be evil in the ears of God. They wanted to challenge God. Right? Why? God heard and was very angry. And the fire went out and consumed them. And it consumed the edge of the camp. Why? Rabba Aznei Hashem. Toana Shehira. They were looking for, Rashi says, a pretext which was evil, Baznei Hashem. Shem Miskavnim, that they intended Shetavoba Aznav, they intended that it should come to his ears, V'yaknit, they should become angry. Amru, they said, Oy lanu, woe is to us, Kama Lavatnu Baderach Hazeh. How much we have struggled on this journey. Shlosha Yamim Shlo Nachnu. 3 days that we have not had respite from this suffering of the way. So why was that a pretext? That seems pretty bad, actually. If they've traveled for 3 days in a row and they haven't had a rest, seems bad enough. So we'll see from the next Rashi. And God was upset, angry. God said, I actually intended for your benefit. I wanted you to enter into the land of Israel immediately. I was intending for your benefit. And you misunderstand me. It seems like they were traveling really, really fast because God was trying to give them on the wings of eagles. So God wanted to bring them in really fast, but they were upset. Rashi says, so who was the ones who were struck down? Those who were muktzin shebahen, those shunted aside amongst them, was shiflus because of their lowliness. Elu iravrav. This refers to the Erev, this mixture. So what does it mean that God consumed the edge of the camp? According to the first explanation of Rashi, God consumed those who were the most wicked, those who were at the edge of the camp who were wicked. But Rabbi Shimon Menashe says, that it refers to not the most sinful, but the officials, the leaders. And why were the leaders punished? Because they could have stopped it.
Who's Rabbi Shimon ben Menashe and why is
Rabbi Shimon Menashe was a Tana. He was time from the period of the Mishnah, and he was in what's called the Midrash Halacha, the ancient Midrashim, around the time of the Mishnah, which Rashi will often serve as the basis for his explanations. So Rashi is citing Rabbi Shimon ben Menashe. But Rashi doesn't want to say that why would God strike the edge of the camp? There's no logical reason for that. So Rashi says the word miktzeh means either the most sinful amongst the people or else the leaders amongst the people. The leaders are blamed for the sins of the people if they could have stopped it, but they don't. Sometimes the leaders egg them on and then they're even worse. But even if they don't egg them on, but they just have the ability to stop it, they're just as bad.
Does
Or not
Rashi
just
say
as bad, but they're
anything?
bad.
Does he say anything about how they could have stopped it? I mean, there's a reference to his explanations of something in Genesis 47, but I don't know.
Rashi, it doesn't say here, Rashi doesn't say here that the leaders could have stopped it, but he says that the leaders were punished. Presumably they're punished because they could have stopped it. Why else would you punish them? So the commentaries say that they were punished because they could have stopped it. That's what Be'er Yitzchak says. And the people cried out to God. And the people cried out to God, and Moshe prayed to God and the fire sank. Matishka ha'esh. Let's see what Rashi says. It's like a king of flesh and blood. He was angry at his son. So it's the parable like a king of flesh and blood who was angry at his son, and the son went to the father's friend and say, go pray on me for mercy. So the people cried out to Moshe. Because Rashi's bothered. Why are the people not crying out to God? Shows the distance here, by the way. It's a powerful point that Rashi is highlighting. The people earlier in Exodus, the people cried out to God. Now they don't even feel like they could cry out to God. They have to cry out to Moshe. Because now that they've known God and disappointed him, it takes a special chutzpah. So they're actually farther away from God at this point than they were when they were in Egypt. You follow that? So the people cried out to Moshe, and Moshe prayed for them. And the fire sank. Shakabim koma ba'aretz. The fire. Hold on one sec. So Vatishka Ish, the fire sank. Shakabim koma ba'aretz. It sank back into the earth. She'ilu chazra lachas haruchos, if it had just gone back in a different direction, we've destroyed that entire direction. So it had to sink into the ground. Okay, God called that place Tavera, Kivara Bam Eish Hashem, because that's where the fire of God burnt. Verse 4. The way you read this is Veha Safsuf. So the word, the aleph in that word does not have a vowel underneath it. At least in my Chumash, so you don't pronounce it. Veha Safsuf. Does yours have a vowel underneath?
No.
So you'd have to read it. Veha Safsuf. Asher Bekerbo. Hitavu Tava. So this is the rabble, the Asapsuf, those who were gathered up, that were amongst them. They had this tremendous desire, and they returned and they cried, and all of Israel cried, and they said, "Who's going to give us meat? Who's going to give us meat?" Rashi again blames these people as the Erev Rav. Or the Erev Rav, these are the ones who don't typically have, they were not typically from the Jewish people. They were the Jewish people themselves were not sinning. It was the Erev Rav. It was this mixed multitude. Probably they were people from other nations who joined. And they had a tremendous desire. They gathered amongst them when they left Egypt. And they Vayeshuvu Gam Bnei Yisrael, and they wept along with the Erev Rav, and they said, Mi yachilenu basar, who's going to give us meat? And here the question is, V'chilo yalem basar, didn't they have meat? V'lo kvar nemar, doesn't it already say, V'gam Erev Rav alayitam, there was the Erev Rav went up with them, and V'tzonu vakar, and they had sheep and cattle. So they had meat. What was wrong with the meat they had? If you would say they ate them, how could you say they ate the meat when it says that when they went into Egypt, Reuven had a lot of cattle? So why were they asking for meat? They were looking for a pretext. They had plenty of meat.
But Bnei Gad and Reuven could have gotten them from Shalal of Midian. That's
So
not fair.
You're suggesting that they got to meet later.
That's 38 years later.
Yeah, but that's a good answer. I guess it's a good question on Rashi. But Rashi's saying, first of all, the burden of proof is on you, Rabbi Yosef, because Rashi says they had the meat when they went up from Egypt. It says they went up with Sonu Vakar. They took up their sheep and their cattle. So you have to prove that they ate them. And Rashi says, even if you prove that they ate them, I'll come back to you and say, they had other sources of meat. They had the meat from around them. But you're right.
I'll
it
tell you what I
seems-
told my friend Tony Joyal, okay? They were already in the desert for more than a year. They didn't have a source of food for these animals. They had the manna for themselves. And so these animals would have either died or been left somewhere along the way. And you know, it's more than a year after. They've been eating only man for more than a year.
So you think they had no meat? You think they really had no
I
meat?
think that they lost those cattle and sheep, and they had still sheep for the second Pesach, you know, second year. But that's it, meaning that's when they ate all their sheep. And you know, how are you supposed to take care of sheep when you're in the middle of the desert?
Well, you know, and I don't know about if I agree about that, because when I was in this desert, this northern Saudi Arabian desert, I saw the sheep and the goats wandering around there. The goats, they know how to survive.
Rabbi
Yeah.
Steinsaltz is touching on your point, Rabbi Yosef. He says that they did have the sheep and the cattle though, but they wanted to refrain from killing them because it was difficulty in raising them in the wilderness, like you said, and then replacing the ones that they have slaughtered. But he does think that they had sheep. They just were using it. They didn't want to use their own sheep. They wanted it from Hashem.
Yeah, because the sheep and the goats they need it for milk. Do people drink sheep milk? I don't know. I never heard of it, but cheese. Oh yeah, feta cheese. Was it feta cheese?
Sheep and
Yeah.
goat, like
The
that.
only food I never liked in my life was goat cheese. It's a very distinct taste, and you either love it or you despise it. So it's not to my taste. What?
More for the rest of us.
Okay, good, good. All right, let's dive in mincha. On that note.
Yeah, sure, Carl. Thank you for.
Go ahead.